of the background, because we don't need that actually, because you guys are seeing me. But I did want to get it recorded because I think it's useful for those that are away today to know what to do with the titration. Alrighty, so I have passed out some notes on titration and accuracy improving techniques. I'm going to go through step by step, and I'll try to also write down some of the stuff that I'm saying so that way I can scan the notes and also make sure I'm not going too fast. Alright, so here's all of our titration equipment that we need. First thing I should kind of point out is all the stuff we have. So we have our burette. Currently it is upside down, which isn't very useful to me, but that's fine. I'll move it around. So that is attached to a clamp stand. So just moving that the right way around. I'm also going to move it so that way the numbers on the burette face me as well, so it's easier for me to read them. You guys were using this the other day. The other thing that I have is I have a funnel to help me fill the burette. I have distilled water, useful for rinsing and things like that. I only have a 10 ml pipette for today. That's what I want to use for the solutions that I have. I have one flask. You're welcome to have multiple flasks. It's just up to you when you do your titrations if you wanted to use the same one and just rinse it out, or if you want to use multiple ones so that way you can have them all next to you. The other thing that I have is my little bulb. This is my personal preference of which bulb I like. Hopefully yesterday, Tuesday, you figured out which one you liked. But I want to grab my beaker. Hold on. I have 3 beakers. The reason why is because one beaker is going to be labeled acid, one's going to be labeled base, and one's going to be labeled waste. The way I do this is I take a whiteboard marker. Really useful to do this because they're all colorless solutions, and that is going to be really hard to tell what's what. And you don't want to put things in the wrong place. This can really muck up your titration. So I'm just going to write B for my base, A for my acid, W for my waste. Cool. Alright, the other thing that I have up here is my pheno, which is my indicator, which you guys had just played with. When the pheno was added to an acid, what color was it? White. White is not the word we use in chemistry. Colorless is the word we use because there are things that are white. Alright, and then what about when I added it to a base? The pinky purple kind of look. It's a really nice one. So with that, that's going to be my indicator in order to tell when I've hit that end point and my concentration of my acid and my base are equal to each other. We're not going to use a universal indicator because it's really hard to get that green color. This is really clear because it's going to be like colorless and then pink and then you stop. So I'm going to start pouring things. First question, the 2 solutions that the teacher is using right now, I'm going to be using sodium hydroxide, so NaOH, and I'm using hydrochloric acid. Now, in this situation, I do know the concentrations of both, but let's pretend I only know the concentration of one of them. The sodium hydroxide is at 0.1 moles per liter. You might also see it being referred to as like a giant M. Okay. We're going to pretend that my hydrochloric acid is my unknown for today. I do know what the concentration is, but the idea of titration is I take one known concentration, I know the volumes that I'm using, and I can figure out then the unknown concentration. We're not going to do any of the calculations today. It's just mainly to kind of show you guys the process of what's going on. We're good so far. So that's the first question. All right, so let's put that into my beaker. So I have my sodium hydroxide. Pouring it into here. The reason why we're doing that is because you guys can't just take the giant bottles with you. I think 4 actually. I'm not sure how many come in. Alright. So there's my base. And my acid's going in my acid beaker. And that's it. Alright, so the first step is the chemical that's going into the burette. So what is going into my burette is going to be my base. And what is going into my pipette and aliquoting into the flask So what's going into here and going into my flask is going to be the acid. So I'll write that on the board too. So NaOH, this is going into my burette, and this is going into my pipette. And then from the pipette, it'll go into the flask. We call that volume that I'm pipetting the aliquot. So in this case, my aliquot is going to be 10 mils. Okay. Backtrack. Okay. All right. Cool. But before I do any of that, I need to do my rinsing. The important thing about rinsing is that we need to rinse with whatever is going into each substance. So most of you guys will think, oh, I should be rinsing with water because water cleans things. And yes, that is true. But in this instance, we actually want to rinse with the reagent that we're putting into it. The reason why is because if I rinse with water and there's leftover water droplets in my burette, it's going to then potentially dilute my base. So we rinse with what we're planning to put in there. So it's still cleaning it, but any droplets that are remaining are not going to cause any further dilution. So base goes in here, have my waste beaker. You don't need a whole lot, you just need basically a splash. So I'm going to close my beaker. So I'm not putting a whole lot into it because like I said, it's just a rinse. You can see that it's not even hitting the 50 mark. And then I'm just flushing it out. So that's rinsing of my burette. Rinsing of my pipette. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to suck up the solution past the line because I'm mindful that when I am actually pipetting, it is possible that I do that. So again, I want to rinse to the points that it'll possibly touch. So I'm actually going to go and do over 10 mils of acid to do the rinse process, just to make sure that the whole thing is rinsed. Patience, patience, patience. There we go. A little bit higher. Taking it out, and then putting it again into that waste beaker. Okay? So pipette is getting rinsed with the acid, burette is being rinsed with the base. AKA whatever I'm planning to put into each of my pieces of equipment, I'm rinsing with whatever is going to go in there. And again, we don't want to rinse with water because if I rinse with water, it'll potentially dilute both chemicals, which I don't want to do because I'm trying to calculate concentration. All right. What questions do you have so far? Are you okay? Okay. So now I can close this. What I'm going to do is fill this guy up with base. Again, very important that I have my beakers labeled because they look exactly the same. If you're noticing when you're titrating that something looks really off and your numbers don't make sense, do a quick double check to make sure your solutions are correct. You can put it into the waste beaker and add some pheno. And if it's pink, then you know that you do have the base in there. And if it doesn't turn pink, then you accidentally put the acid in there. So I am closing that. I'm filling this up. You don't need to fill it up to 0, 0 because we are going to measure the before and after, so it's not the end of the world. If it's, I overdid that. Let's take some of that out. Not a big deal. That happens. I should probably put that into my base beaker. All right. So we're at. Just going to remove that funnel. Move over my base beaker because I can actually save that. Right, awesome. Happy with that. That's all filled up. Next thing I'm going to be filling up is my flask. So I'm going to take my 10 mils of my acid. Now with this pipette, what I find that I need to do is to overfill it, and then I like to use my thumb to control the amount. Some of you guys might find that you like other beakers, other pipettes better. Other bulbs better. Basically up to your personal preference. There we go. Maybe a little more. One more time. Oh, the bulb. There we go. All right, so now that I've done that, Remember that I'm going to eye level because I want to read at the bottom of the meniscus. If I go below or above, the problem I'm going to have is parallax error, and that's going to cause me to misread where I see that meniscus. So I'm just coming to eye level, slowly releasing my thumb, and making sure that bottom of that meniscus is at the line. The other thing that I will double check for is to make sure there's no droplets on the outside of the pipette, because that will deliver extra acid. If there is, I take a paper towel and just dry it. Then I shift it over into the flask. And I should hopefully have aliquoted 10 mils accurately. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch the tip of the pipette to the flask, because the surface tension will help pull out the remaining acid. You will notice that there's a little bit of acid left over my pipette. I don't want you guys to grab the bulb and like it out. This is factored in when they make the pipette, that some of that liquid won't come out. So don't worry about trying to get that bit out. Cool. All right, that's my pipette. All right, so the other thing I do is I put my pheno into my flask, because I need to see that color change. And I put maybe about 2 to 3 drops. Maybe one more for good measure. Cool. Now, it's colorless right now because it's an acid. We're good so far. All right, so looking at my steps to help me improve my accuracy. The first thing is I'm going to put a white piece of paper underneath my flask when I'm doing my titration. Any idea of why? So I can see the pink. So it'll be a lot easier for me to see the pink. And when it comes to seeing that pink, I want to get a pale pink color. I don't want to get a dark pink color. If I have a dark pink color, I've gone too far. So I want to get it as pale as possible for when it keeps holding that pink color. I don't want a pink that's going to fade over time. I want it to kind of stick around. So in order for me to make sure I get that pale pink color and I don't overdo it, I have a white piece of paper to help me see that. All right. And the reason why is if I go too far, then my equations won't work. So if I go too pink, I have too much base, and when I do the calculations, I'm not going to correctly calculate out the acid. Good? All right. Second thing that I've done a bit earlier is I've removed the funnel from my burette. Really important that I do that before I read my burette, because there are sometimes little droplets of base left over my funnel. And what I could have happen is I could do the reading, go do my work, and then one of these drops fall down and change the volume of my burette. So I want to make sure I remove that and remove that potential error. You guys were talking about that yesterday when you were playing with the burette, that you guys were figuring out what the volume of a drop was and how much that can actually change your reading. So I make sure my burette is moved. Sorry, my funnel is moved. So that's number 6B. And then the other thing for number 6C is I get to eye level. And one of the things I like to do to help me read things is I, again, use that white piece of paper. Right? We want to get that white piece of paper behind so that way we can read the bottom of the meniscus. Meniscus puts it on. So here's my burette. I want to read the bottom of it, and I want to get to eye level for that. If I don't get to eye level, what happens is something called parallax error. And that causes you to misread the volume. So let's say if I'm looking below with my little eyeball and looking up like that, I'm going to misread the volume. Or if I'm getting above and I look down, I'm going to, again, misread the volume. So we want to get to eye level for that. The reason why I'm going through all these little bits and details is that when it comes to your write-up, you need to explain your accuracy improving techniques, and these are the things that you're doing. So if I'm a little short, you can also grab chairs, there's little step stools around. Go on your tippy toes, that sort of thing. You can also move the burette up and down if you want to help get it to eye level. So if I'm looking at that, it is about 1.15. So my starting is 1.15 milliliters. And again, remember, we're going to be taking the difference. We good so far? Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of talking because I have to show you all the steps. Okay, so next thing that I'm going to do, keep in mind that when we record our values, we want to record them to 2 decimal places because we can assume whether or not it's on the line. If it's on the line, it ends in a 0, and if it's not on the line, in between 2 lines, we put it as the ending number as 5. So for me, when I read that, it wasn't quite on 0.1, and it wasn't quite on 1.2, so I put it between. Right. Now what we're going to do is my first titration. We call this titration the rough titration, and it's exactly for the reason of you're not supposed to get a good number here. This is supposed to give you a ballpark idea, so that way when you do your accurate titrations, you will be able to know roughly how much you need. So we have rough, and then you have your accurate ones. So the first one is a rough one, and it's just to get me an idea of how many liters of base will I need. Do I need 30 mils? Do I need 15 mils? That sort of thing. So this is going to be kind of like fast and loose, a real mess kind of thing. You okay with that so far? Once you have an idea of where your rough titration is, then what you can do is say, oh, I know it's at 30 mils. I will add like 28 mils, and then I'll stop. Because remember, you can have control over how fast the solution comes out of the burette. So if I know it's going to take me ages, I might as well shoot it all the way to like 28 and then start doing the accurate kind of drop by drop method. So rough one, you just do as like a rough titration. We're just trying to get an idea of how much I need. So I'm just going to shoot this in, and I'm looking to see, is it turning pink? Or anywhere near pink. And what you're going to realize is that it's not, which allows me to tell you about another thing of not to do. Now right now I'm about ready to run out. I'm just going to stop it. Just going to stop it there. All right, hasn't turned pink yet. Not a mistake on my part. It's a different mistake, actually. But we'll keep going and we'll refill it. So right now it's at 49.567. Where that volume is at. What's up? Just watch that. You're in line with my camera. All right. 31.3. There you go. All right, I'm going to refill it. Hopefully, this round is around. We may take 3 though. All right. Looking at that. Ooh, got it on 0. That's my starting. So far, I've already used up, let's see from that, 49.7 minus 1.15. So far I've used 48.55 milliliters of base. That wasn't enough to neutralize the acid. All right, let's do it again. Like I said, rough titration. Try to look for it to turn pink. Hasn't turned pink yet. Not on an error on my part. Actually, it's a teaching error. Did it on purpose. So you see why we do rough titrations? And we don't just drip, drip, drip the whole time? Otherwise, I would be here for a very, very long time. Once I know what my idea number is, then I can do the little drip, 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 get it really accurate. Alright, not happening yet. Stop it there. Another reading. That was 49.7. Keep hitting that number. Alright, so that was an easy difference. I have 49.7 mils that I've used. So this is what I have to use so far. But that's okay. Alright, fill this again. So this is not ideal. This is not what you want to do. Every time I refill it, I'm introducing more error. So we're not going to do this in the actual assessment. I'm just trying to show a point of why we do part A of this assessment. Cool, so is that 5? Yeah, 6.5. Alright, 0.50 milliliters is what I'm starting with here. Alright, here we go. I'm just moving down so I can actually see. The other thing you can do is you can do a little swishing, just swirl it. And I'm just trying to look at the center where the base is being added to the acid just to see if I see any pink color starting to form. I did a lot actually. Start seeing some pink forming. That's good. I need more though. Okay. Let's see. That one is 49.6. So the difference there is 49.1. So that's everything that I've used so far. It's taking a lot more than I thought it was going to, which is fine. That just makes my point for why we do part A. Whoa. Oh, that's way over 1. I'm gonna take that out. All right. That looks like 9.5. 0.95 is what I'm saying there. Hopefully this time we get pink. Well, then it's going to be take this long. Might add some more indicator. Make it a little more sensitive. Otherwise, something is not working, which is fine. I can still make my point. Turn pink. I'm just going to check my base real quick. Oh, the jug. Sorry. Alright, that is not turning pink like I want it to. Let me just check my sodium hydroxide to make sure it actually is still working. So, really good lesson though. So if we are stuck somewhere, like something's not working like I expect it to work, this is what I would do. I would take a little bit of my base, put it into my waste, and I'll put it with the phenol. And in theory, if it turns pink, then it's fine. So I know that something's fine with my base. I know it's just, I really need a lot of base for this to work. I'll try one more time, see if it goes. So that one is 49.7 again. Alright, so that's 48.75. Alright, we'll try one more time. And if it doesn't change, that's fine. Main thing was just kind of show you guys something. Not too much. The acid I used way too strong. And that's kind of crazy too, considering I only put 10 mils of that acid in there. Right, 1.17. I run out of space, so that needs to change now. I'm running out of patience. Doesn't change. That is so impressive. That acid is really filtered. Alright, let that be a lesson. Really excited to change something. Oh, sorry. Missed the 50 mark. Anyway, it has not changed, which is fine. The main thing I want to kind of tell you with that. So, things that we need to be mindful of. So right now, even without it finishing, and I accidentally went past the 50, so we know it's well over 50. $50 minus 7.6. That's 48.3. Okay. I'm just going to add all those numbers together just to kind of get an idea of how much base that I've used. That one is 49.7. Alright, so I have almost used like 200, well over 200 mils. So total base that I've used so far. So I have used 244.4 milliliters of base. And when it comes to the acid, how much did I use? Only 10. All right, so that is obviously a clear problem when I look at that. So, things to kind of keep in mind when it comes to various kind of errors and things like that. First off, I should not be refilling the burette in the middle of my titration. When I do that, I introduce error, because each time I read the burette, I can potentially read it wrong. I can also make mistakes like I have done right now, where I have the remaining base has fallen over 50 and I can't read that number. So there's lots of potential errors every time I try to refill it. I could also forget to put the funnel off. There's all these things that I could be doing wrong. So when we are doing titrations, we want to make sure that the titration fits in the burette, so you don't have to keep refilling it. So when I look at this, which of these two solutions do you think is more concentrated, the acid or the base? The acid. And that's because I only used 10 mils of acid and I've used buckets and buckets of base. That's the other thing we have to keep in mind. So, what should I do to help with my titration? What can I do? There's two things I can do. I could use a more concentrated base, is one option. Option number 2 is I dilute my acid down. So part A of the assessment is looking at planning before you titrate. So I'm going to give you the acid and the base, and you're going to do like a rough titration using pipettes and counting how many pipettes of base you need for your acid. And then you'll be able to do some calculations to figure out, okay, how much do I need to dilute my acid by? Looking at this, it already looks pretty insane that it's only 10 mils of acid and like 244 mils of base. So I probably want to dilute this like 25-fold to make these two numbers more similar. Yeah? So what I had in reality is I had 0.1 moles of sodium hydroxide and I had 1 mole of hydrochloric acid. In theory, it should have been a 10-fold difference. It's 10 times more concentrated. So if I used 10 mils, I should have then used 100 in theory. I don't know what happened there. It didn't work, but that's okay. That is why we do the dilution of the acids. Or you might need to do dilution of the base, depending on what you're getting. So that's something to keep in mind. In order to fix this problem next time, I will need to dilute the acid. And that's what part A focuses on. And that's what I'll do in our next lesson, is talk about how do we do those calculations, how do we figure out the ratio between the two. Are you okay with that so far? Right? Once I have this working, just trying to think. I will talk about that actually when we do part A. Cool. All right, what questions do you have so far after that? Yes, sir. That was supposed to be 100 mils. That was not 100 mils. All right. So when it comes to cleanup, let me grab my base speaker. Now, personally, I'm happy if you guys want to recycle your acid and your base because I don't want to accidentally run out of solutions. But if you have forgotten which one's which, I'd rather you check them out. So if this came off and you weren't sure this was acid or base, I'd rather you check it out. If you are confident and you know this is the base, then you can go and put it back into the base glass. That is fine with me. All right, so keep that in mind when you guys are actually doing titrations. Then I'm happy for you guys to return your excess. I would rather you guys be a little bit mindful of not overpouring, so that way we reduce the risk of contamination. Because if you accidentally put acid into the base, then the whole thing's going to go haywire. But from my experience, it's been fine. People are pretty good about double checking, and if they aren't sure, they just chuck it. So I'm sure this is acid. I've labeled it acid. I'm putting it back with my acid. All right, now that I'm at the end of my procedure, what I do is I rinse everything with distilled water. So burette gets rinsed with distilled water, pipette gets rinsed with distilled water, all the flasks and all the beakers get rinsed with distilled water. It has to be distilled water so that way we don't have any potential ions left over that can clog my system. So again, when it comes to doing that, you can keep it really, really easy. Where'd my waste beaker go? There it is. With the pipette, I'm happy if you want to just take the water bottle and just squirt it down, or you can pour some water into a clean beaker. Rinse that out real quick. And then do the same thing that you did at the beginning, which was flushing it with what you knew. At the end, everything is distilled water. There's no acid or base you have to worry about. So this one I'm overfilling again, so that way I can get all the acid out that was in there. There we go. So again, I like to overfill it just to make sure there's any acid particles at the top, they come down. So distilled water at the end for everybody. Let that go. And then same thing with the burette. Put the this one I'm a little more generous on, just water. And I want to make sure it gets a good flush through. So when it comes to returning the burettes and things like that, I leave it so that way it's on the open valve to keep it draining, and I flip it upside down for storage so that way if there's any water, it flows out like that. That's why when you find your burette, they're housed this way. Most cases, you guys are going to just be putting yours back into the container. Since this one I keep out regularly for demonstrations and things, I leave it out like that. That's it. All right, what questions do you have? Okay. All right, I'll pass out the homework, which is some side pad pages. Yeah.
The number 10 one, I don't really catch.
Number 10?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the problem with this demo is that I have used way more than 50 mils of base, so I've overused what is in my burette. So this is a problem because I have to refill the burette. And by refilling the burette, I'm introducing a lot of errors. So it means I could potentially leave my funnel in there and I get drops. It means that I could be misreading my burette. Like there's just too many sources of error when I do that. It's not an accurate titration that way. Yep. And then, like I said, to fix that problem, I would then use my acid. Cool. All right, let's pass out the work. Sorry that was so long. It usually is.